Hello again, everybody. This is Ed Lynch at Surfing Baseball. I wanted to do a quick intro on my next guest, Mr. Jim Riggleman, Jim played against each other in the minor leagues. We worked together with the San Diego Padres. I hired him as a manager of the Chicago Cubs. Jim managed over 1,600 games in the major leagues, and he managed probably another 1,600 in the minor leagues. So you're talking about a guy that's managed about 3,000 games in professional baseball, and it's sad what's happened these days that people who are getting hired to be managers in the big leagues have never had the opportunity to manage at the minor league level. I know a lot of guys say they don't want to do it, but boy, I'll tell you what, it's a learning experience. You're a lot better off making these mistakes in the minor leagues that we all make. You're better off making those mistakes in the minor leagues rather than the big leagues. So, I think it's important that I talk to people like Pete Rose and, Hall of Fame players and Hall of Fame managers. But Jim Riggleman was a hell of a manager, a hell of a good guy. And you'll see by my interview, his number one concern was always the players. He was a great tactician. He was a great motivator. You might look at his career record and say, well, it's not that great. But let me tell you something. This guy took over some bad clubs and made them better. And I can tell you from firsthand experience that this guy was a heck of a manager, a heck of a person, and a personal friend of mine who I admire and respect greatly. So here's my interview with Jim Riggleman. Thank you. This is Ed Lynch on Surfing Baseball with Ed Lynch. My partner, Bob Nightingale, is not here today, but he will be in future broadcasts. My guest today is Jim Riggleman, former major league manager, minor league manager, professional player. In order to get this broadcast, you can go to any of our social media sites on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, X, formerly known as Twitter, and LinkedIn. And in the search bar, just put Surfing Baseball with Ed Lynch. Good morning, Jim.
Morning, Ed. Good to talk to you.
Yeah, how's everything down in Florida?
Everything's good. At this time of year, we get a little bit of rain and potential storms and stuff, but overall, it's very nice.
Yeah, I bet. I love Florida. It's my home state. But hey, Jim, to get started, why don't you, a lot of people know who you are, but they don't really know your path to becoming a major league manager. You played college baseball, and at the end of your I assume your senior season, I assume you were drafted by who and what round, and why don't you walk us through your career as a player and then the transition to being a minor league manager or coach?
Okay. Yeah, you know what, Ed? I played at Frostburg State College, now university, graduated in 74. The rules at that time were you couldn't be drafted until you were 21 years old if you were in a 4-year university. They got rid of that. So I couldn't get drafted until after my senior year. I got drafted in the 4th round by the Dodgers, played parts of 3 seasons with them, got traded to the Cardinals, and really kind of spent a long time with the Cardinals from that point on, and felt, I guess I considered myself a Cardinal, thought I would be a lifetime Cardinal actually. And played at AA and AAA throughout the Dodger Cardinal systems. Didn't play good enough to play in the big leagues, but I had a nice minor league career, enjoyed every minute of it. I was fortunate enough to be asked, would I be interested in staying in the organization when I was done as a coach or a manager, whatever was available. And so I took that route and started my managing career, managed at every level in the minor leagues, bounced through the systems, every minor league town, that you could hit, and leagues, and played against you a little bit in one of those leagues. And then went to the big leagues. My mentor in the game, one of my mentors in the game, Whitey Herzog, was managing the Cardinals. We had an opening on the big league staff. He invited me onto the staff. It was the best thing that could ever happen to me. It was kind of like in today's world, if you, or back in our day, if you were a Bear Bryant assistant, you might get a job as a head coach. If you were a Joe Paterno assistant or Nick Saban assistant, you might get a head coaching job. And that's the way it was a little bit with Whitey. If you worked under Whitey, people maybe thought you learned something. And so when Whitey resigned from St. Louis, I'm looking for a job. Joe McIlvaine with the New York Mets called me. He had left the Mets to take the Padres position as general manager. I looked at it like, I don't know Joe. I heard a lot about him, but I knew that he had just signed on for a 5-year run with San Diego, so that might be a good place for me to go. He was asking me to go there, so I went there as his AAA manager, and that's where I met you as his farm director for being Joe's farm director. You were my boss. And,
hey, Jim, let me stop you there. Yeah, that's where you and I first got a chance to work together since, I pitched against you in Double-A.
Yeah.
I just want to take a step back. When you were with the Cardinals, your first year or two managing, I don't think people realize just what a one-man job that is, or was back then. I mean, now you have nutritionists and strength and conditioning people. You might even have, at the big league level, it's ridiculous now the number of coaches they have. But your first couple of years, you played for, you talk about mentors, but a gentleman by the name of George Kissel. Why don't you talk about George a little bit and what he meant to you and every other young manager, and talk to people about your daily routine. I assume you didn't have multiple coaches. I assume you had a trainer. But what was it like back then, man? What was your first year managing?
Yeah, you got it right. My first 4 years managing, I started in '82, and the first year I had a coach was '86. I did everything, and I'm glad I did, because I felt like it helped me learn the game. George Kissel he was the greatest, and I'm going to hold this little notebook up. That's stuff that I wrote down that George Kissel told me through the years. I looked at the date when I got that. That was '84, 40 years ago. And I took that with me everywhere I ever went to manage. But George was a great teacher of the game. We could go on forever about George, but he's the reason I got into managing. And he was a huge help to me. But the physical aspect of the job, you were a one-man show. I got there not real early by today's standards, but I got there early enough to set everything up for the day. And between me and my trainer, we would get it all ready. And now here come the players, and it's batting practice, it's ground balls, it's pitcher side sessions, it's running the pitchers, it's little conferences with players. And at that time, I was in my early 30s. I had tremendous energy to do all this, but I'm really glad, looking back on it, that that's the way it was, because it forced me to get in the head of a pitcher and know hitters, every position, catchers, to learn what they're thinking. And because I knew myself basically as an infielder, but now I've got to look at every aspect of the game, hitting, pitching, time management, dealing with umpires, everything you do, you were a one-man show. And
this is after throwing every group of batting practice every day.
Yeah.
I don't think people understand just how taxing that can be on a body throwing.
Well, and you had
groups like they do now.
We basically I threw an hour a day, and we had my pitchers hitting ground balls. They were hitting fungos.
That's what I did. That's what I did in the minor leagues, hit fungos.
That's right. And it was a great experience, though. It's the way it was. Now, it's going to be better if you have coaches, because it's going to be better for the players. They're going to get more attention. Yeah. If I'm throwing batting practice, I can't be working with my second baseman. So that means if I want to work with my middle infielders, I got to bring them out early to do that work with them, because during batting practice, I'm not going to be available to do that. But it all got done. We made it.
Plus another thing that people don't realize, when I assume you coach third base.
Yeah.
All the time. So you're not in the dugout when your players are in the dugout hitting.
Right.
And that's a little bit of a disconnect. And back then I was a minor league player in that era, and it's amazing how many things we learned from each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
And because if I was struggling with my breaking ball, I would go to a guy who, God, man, you got a good breaking ball. How do you hold that? Things like that. And I'm a big believer, if you learn something on your own, you tend not to forget it as quickly if compared to if somebody just comes up and tells you something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we coached each other, but when I was playing, teammates of mine who I'd played with for a couple of years, they would make comments to me about my stride or my hands or why'd you take that pitch? I know you can hit that ball. What are you doing? There was no hitting coach.
Yeah.
And again, it's better when you have those coaches because they're going to be helping players. But I'm glad I went through that process that I did, because I think overall it did help me understand all aspects of the game. Along those lines, what we're talking about there, I just read the book of Joe by Joe Madden and Tom Verducci. Outstanding book. I'm not here to promote his book, but I mean, it was really, Joe went through that. That's what Joe did when he was in the minor leagues managing, and I managed against Joe. Yeah. And he talks about those experiences. I think people who love the game would enjoy his book, reading about what Joe went through in the minor leagues.
Yeah, Joe, it was funny. I had Terry Collins on the other day, and Joe was a student of the game. And, obviously he's had a very successful career. But when Terry Collins took over in Anaheim as the manager, Joe Madden was on the coaching staff. And so after about a month or so, Joe started feeling a little bit comfortable. And they're playing Seattle that night. And Joe comes into him and says, hey, I got an interesting fact. And he goes, what's that? He says, well, I was looking at Ken Griffey Jr., and not once in his entire career has he hit a ground ball to the left side of the infield. And Terry's like, what? Right. So they shifted. They actually shifted that night, and it was in all the papers. All the writers are going, what is this? Is this legal? And they got him to try to bunt, and he popped the ball up. And, and so Joe is probably the guy that was, instrumental in implementing the first shifts in baseball since the 40s. I mean, Lou Boudreau had this shift against Ted Williams, et cetera. But, Joe's an outstanding baseball guy. So, let's talk about, when I got to San Diego, you were in San Diego, and I'm learning I'm fresh out of law school. I hadn't, I played my last year in 88. Now it's 1991. We're in spring training. I didn't know what to do. And Tom Gamboa was a field coordinator, and he took charge of the spring training. And, I was kind of learning as I went, and to have it was really a big help, because AAA is probably the most difficult level to manage for a lot of reasons. And you were an experienced guy. It would have been a disaster if I had a guy there that never managed, and the two of us knuckleheads are trying to figure it out. So, what are the unique challenges of managing at AAA? I mean, I know the answer to this, I think, but what are some of the unique challenges at managing AAA versus A-ball?
Yeah, well, first of all, let me say this. You were very wise to, even though you were in the boss position, you were running the minor leagues, you had Tom Gamboa, who was outstanding. And like you said, he set up spring training, and you trusted him and you let him do his job. I was, since he's the field coordinator, I'm the AAA manager. Tom and I work closely together, and the point is to get these players ready for the big leagues. But you allowed Tom and I to run that level of baseball without correcting us or whatever. You were humble enough to say, hey, these guys are experienced. They know what they're doing. I'm going to trust them. Joe McIlvain trusts them, so I'm going to trust them. So it worked tremendously. Now, the challenges at AAA can be very difficult, because you've got a lot of players who they just can't believe they're not in the big leagues. Exactly. Why did that guy go up and I didn't go up? When am I going to get my chance? That type of thing. And when you get a guy who's been up and now he comes back, he may be a different guy than what you used to have. So you're dealing with those type of emotions. But I will say this: I managed in AAA 2 years for you guys there in San Diego, and then I managed a couple 3 years in Louisville. For the Reds. I was the luckiest manager in the world. I had great teams that were just wonderful guys. I got very little. I got almost no pushback of why am I getting screwed here? Why am I not in the big leagues? I should be there. I'm better than that guy. My guys played hard. They gave a great effort. We just had a great time with those teams. And, I could name names, but it would take too long. But they just gave us everything they had. We had no problems. And, it was just a total pleasure. AAA isn't always going to be that way.
No.
You can have some nightmares in AAA.
Yeah, I played AAA. It seemed like when I got to AAA, it was my first time there. So like half the team was wide-eyed and a little intimidated. The other half are pissed off because they're not in the big leagues.
Exactly.
So the key to leadership is keep that one half of their pissed off away from the guys that are still have some enthusiasm. So so you got your big league chance. I remember I was there. Greg Riddock, I guess, was the manager, and he invited you to come on to his major league staff, and that's what happened, correct?
Well, if you I'll correct you a little bit on that. What happened was I was with the club in spring training. As a AAA manager, you're going to be in Major League spring training. So I was there then. That was in 92. I managed, 91. I managed Las Vegas. I had been in Major League camp with Greg. Then in 92, again, same thing, Major League camp. But then I managed the whole year in AAA, and the season was over. And Joe decided to make a change at the Major League managing position. He let Greg go.
Oh, that's right.
I had been home. I was down here in Florida. I had been home a couple of weeks, and he called me and said, I want you to come in and take the club these last 2 weeks, and then you'll have the club next year. So it was basically a 1-year contract, and I became the Major League manager.
Yeah, that's quite a phone call to get. That's one of those top 10 in your entire lifetime phone calls, that you'll get.
Yeah.
And then, you managed the club in 93, and then Joe got let go, and Joe went to New York, brought me with him as his assistant general manager. I was there in the 94 season. Then on October 10th of 94, I was named general manager of the Chicago Cubs, and I was talking to you during that period of time. I guess the statute of limitations on tampering is run, so I'm not afraid of getting busted for that.
I think we're all right.
I think we're okay. It was 30 years ago, which is hard to believe. And you were the only guy I had my sights on, and I thought I was worried about the Padres. You come and ask a team, hey, can I have your current major league manager to come manage for us? And, it got a little sticky there. And then I think because they had Bruce Bochy in the wings right there, it was something they were willing to consider. And to their credit, to Randy Smith's credit, he wanted to give you an opportunity, and you came over to Chicago. And the funny thing is, our first spring was replacement players.
Yeah.
And you talk about a challenge. I mean, I told our people, I'm trying to run the major league club. I didn't have an assistant, or I didn't have any, intern, nothing. So it was just me running the club. And I asked our minor league people, listen, I want you to go out and find replacement players. I'm not going to ask anybody. I was the league, the player rep when I was a player. I know how that union is. I know how people are going to be treated if they're labeled a scab. And I didn't want anybody in our organization have to make that choice to cross the picket line, so to speak. So I had our guys out looking, and they told me stories about, one guy told me he got home from his job at Jiffy Lube, and he said, hi, honey, I'm home. Any calls today? Yeah, you got 15 calls from major league clubs today. And I remember our meetings when we're putting the team together, and you said, we're going over the club, and you said, I like Joe Housey in the setup role. And now that's our area scout in Florida. So I'm waiting my entire life to get this job. And I remember sitting there just going, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah. I still talk to Joe. Joe and I keep in touch, and
that was going to be our setup guy.
Yeah.
That's right.
And actually, as it developed further into the spring, I said, I think you're going to need to be our closer. So he advanced from scouting to setup man to closer, and then
I remember we had one of the games was televised in spring training, and Harry's up there, and somebody told him about Joe Housey, and so here comes Housey in the game, and he goes, "Hey, this guy's our area guy in Florida. If he's here, who's watching the players?" That was like a bad B movie. But I'll tell you what, I'll never forget those guys. I remember when we went at the end of spring. You can talk a little bit about the energy, enthusiasm, and how naive those guys were about a lot of things. But I remember we're going to take the airplane from Phoenix to Dallas. We're going to play exhibition series in Texas, and opening day is like the following week, and this is like Friday. So we get to, you and I are going to the airport, and we've been on countless charter flights with teams, and all of a sudden you and I are getting on the plane, and I hear, hey, and these guys want to take a picture of themselves in front of a charter jet to send home to, hey, honey, look at this. You're not going to believe this. But, talk about those guys a little bit. It was uplifting, and ultimately it was kind of sad,
It very much so. I tell you, you fall in love with players. If they give you a good effort, and what good, bad, or indifferent as far as their play, if they give you a good effort, you can't help but love them. And these guys were great. I mean, they really left it out there for us. And you know what, Ed? We were going to be a good team. We were going to be okay. The group was really good, and so we got to that point where we're going to have opening day in a day or two. And we were in Texas. We went to Texas, and we played the game. I think in about the 7th inning or something, you called down to the dugout and said, "Hey, the strike is over. We're going to meet with these guys after the game and tell them, the strike is over, and they're going to get paid this and that, whatever." And so we did that, and we met with the players and just thanked them. And they were so gracious. They were so appreciative of the opportunity to come into what at that time was a major league spring training for them. And but a wonderful group of guys, and it
it's funny, at that time the Tribune, who owned our club, obviously they were going through some tough union problems. And let's face it, I mean, again, the statute of limitations run on this stuff, so I guess I can say this, but those guys at the top of the Tribune company. Now, Jim Dowdle was like the greatest guy in the world.
Yeah,
I mean, he really was.
Yep.
But they had some guys behind the scenes who were hardcore anti-union people because, hey, their management, now they're dealing with a strike, and so they wanted to make sure that these players were taken care of. And what Major League Baseball, I remember, mandated that, when we let them go, we give them a check for $5,000 each. And I remember we were in a conference room at the hotel in Texas, and I'm talking to these guys, and I'm fighting back tears because some of these guys are literally crying.
Yeah.
They thought they were going to put on a Major League uniform. And then I made the announcement, okay, Major League Baseball mandates that we're going to give you $5,000, and that got their attention. I said, in addition, the Tribune is going to give you an additional $5,000. Wow. So those guys walked out of there with a ticket home, and I think we flew them home all first class, like major leaguers, with a check for $10,000 in their pocket. So,
I know. Man,
it was something, and we wound up playing 144 games that year.
Yep.
And we didn't miss a beat. We went from Texas back to spring training. It was, and we went through about a month and a half of spring training. And I remember our opening day was like the end of April.
Yeah. And, well, we had once the strike was over and we started having our players report, we had about 2 or 3 weeks with those guys. We had already had 3 or 4 weeks.
We had about 3 weeks.
Yeah. So now we got these 3 weeks, and we ended up opening up against the Reds.
Yes, that's right.
They had a nice ball club, and Jim Bullinger was our opening day pitcher.
That's right.
And Jim, really, it was based on he was the first guy in spring training of the guys who showed up, and he was the first guy throwing bullpen sessions. He was more ready than anybody, and he did a good job for us. He pitched well, but guys filtered in. It was because nobody knew the strike was going to be over. So some guys were there on Monday. Some guys didn't get there till Thursday or Friday.
Yeah,
so
some guys were ready to go, like you said, and some really weren't ready to go.
Absolutely.
You know, it kind of snuck up on them.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about managing in Chicago and working in Chicago. At that time, you know, I was a player there. So when I played there were no lights. I mean, you talk about a culture shock. I remember when I got traded from the soon-to-be world champion Mets to the last place Cubs in 1986, and I show up at the ballpark and the game's going on, and Gene Michael, one of my favorite people of all time, God rest his soul, was the manager. And it's about the fifth inning, and I sit down, and he looks at me and he goes, "Hey, Ed, how you doing? Welcome. Hey, listen, you know, it's like the seventh or eighth. He goes, hey, go out and warm up. If we go extra innings, you're the pitcher." So I'm out there warming up, and it's the bottom of the ninth, and it's a tie game, and I'm warming up, getting ready to go. And now we don't score, so I'm walking from the bullpen to the mound, and the umpire, we're playing another last place team, and the umpire comes halfway to the mound, starts waving his arms. And I'm like, "What's the matter?" He goes, "We're calling the game because of darkness." I was like, what? I thought I was in a movie, you know? But, you know, I didn't realize that not only, you know, it could be light enough for them to hit. By the time we come up there, though, it won't be light enough. So they just said, "The hell with it." They backed the game. So, and then, you know, later on, we all remember when Dallas Green was going through those problems with the city, trying to get lights in, and they're going to go to Schaumburg, a suburb. And so the deal they made, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think we played like 17 or 18 night games. And the challenge, and you know this, obviously, because you were there, is, I mean, I remember going 2 weeks at a homestand. In the middle of that homestand, we went to play the White Sox in that crosstown classic thing, whatever. Yeah. No, it was regular season. We went over there to play interleague games. That's right. Interleague was in there. So we went 2 weeks without ever playing 2 days in a row at the same time. We played we played at 1:20 on Monday, 7:05 on Tuesday, 1:20 on Wednesday, 7:05 on Thursday. Now, by law, we could not play Friday or Saturday night. So they tried to start late on Friday. So we played 3:05 on Friday. Now we're 1:20 on Saturday, and then we always played at 12:05 on Sunday. So I remember I told Yosh, the clubhouse guy, I said, "Hey, Yosh, I want you to put a big board on every door out of this clubhouse. Put a big sign that says, tomorrow's game is at," and then he just hooked the numbers on there. Yeah. Because, you know, we've all heard stories of guys going to the ballpark for a night game, and it was a day game or vice versa, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
I know. Those challenges were unbelievable. You know, you really had to be strong in your conviction for preparation, you know? Yeah.
Well, that's where the minor league stuff comes in too, though. You know, when you manage in the minor leagues, you see it all. Yeah. Everything has happened. Every delay possible. Every field inconvenience. It's all happened. So now when it's happening at the big league level, you've been through this. You kind of try to set a tone with your players that, hey, it's no big deal. We'll get through it. We'll be all right. Let's use our scheduling here as an asset for us. The other team should be the visiting team coming in here should be the ones having the problem. This should be the norm for us.
That's right. With the winds blowing out 40 miles an hour, I mean, it's a horrible place to pitch. But when I would start a game that as a player, and I used to tell pitchers this, "Hey, you're a little intimidated by that wind. How do you think that guy in the other dugout's feeling right now?"
Absolutely.
I mean, a day game, baseball is a game meant to be played at night. I mean, let's face it, when you come up in the minor leagues, you're playing 6 nights a week, and then you get a break on Sunday. You play at 6 p.m., So, just the mere fact you're going out during the day. I mean, I went in there as a visitor a lot. Nobody wanted to pitch at Wrigley Field.
Well, and the other thing is
just it's a shock to your body. And then if the wind's blowing out on top of that,
and very intimidating. It's such a great city that it was a place where visiting players wanted to bring their wives, or the wives wanted to be there.
Yeah, that's right.
So again, it should be an advantage to us because we all love our wives, but it's a distraction when they travel with you.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry. players have a routine. And when you have that routine, and now instead of going to the ballpark at X time, shopping on Michigan Avenue or something, restaurants, it gets your routine gets different than what it would be. So, but everybody wanted to come to Chicago. So we should really, those day games, the opposing players are going out at night, maybe not, may have a few libations that they're not as ready to play tomorrow as maybe they should be. The home team, it's our routine. We should know how to handle this. And I think whereas it was looked at by a lot of people through the years, oh, it's tough to win in Chicago. All those day games really drained you. To me, it should have been a positive.
I want to talk about the 1998 season. That's one of the most memorable seasons, obviously, that you and I have ever gone through. And it started early. I remember coming into the ballpark on February 14th, 1998, and Sharon Panazzo walks up to me. We had just arrived. Where pitchers and catchers are just reporting, and she said, "Harry Carey had a stroke. We don't think he's going to make it." That was like my day started. Yeah. And you know what a legend Harry was. We talk about him a little bit. I guess he was dining in a restaurant in Palm Springs and had a massive stroke. And I remember talking to the team doctor, and he had gotten the report. He talked to the emergency room in Palm Springs, and I said, "What's the prognosis you think?" Because Harry hadn't died; he was in a coma. He said, "Well, he's dead. He's dead. They're turn off the support, but Harry's gone." Yeah, and that was a very emotional time, because Harry was a unique guy. He was something else.
I loved Harry.
I loved him too.
He treated us so good. He was so good to us there. And, I interviewed with him every day. I don't even know what the show was called, the Harry Carey show, maybe. I don't know. And I loved it because, there was so many radio stations and newspapers covering the team. There would be 25 of them around me out between the dugout and the batting cage. And Harry would come walking down. And he would just kind of part the sea. He would say, "Okay, get out of here. That's it. No. I got to do my show." So I didn't have to be a bad guy and tell the writers, I don't want to talk to you anymore. Harry did it. He said, "Jim's done with you. I got to do the show." So, we would do his show, and he asked some great questions. We had some great moments on there. And then, very sad when he passed. I'm sorry he wasn't there to see the 98 season.
Yeah. And, we were coming off a rough 97 where we started the season very poorly. I'll leave it at that. But I think we were 0-16 to start the season.
Well, we were 0-14. And, God, I hope there's some people listening who remember we went into New York for a doubleheader. And where we had gotten to 0-14, the second game of that doubleheader, ninth inning, we're winning by a run. They've got the tying run on third, and ground ball to Hernandez at short. He throws a one hopper over to first base to Mark Grace. He cheated by about 5 feet coming off the base. If there was replay, it would have been called safe. Mark made a great snag of the throw. Game over. We're now 1-14. So, but what else happened in that game was Rojas, our closer, he went in the eighth. We're so desperate to win. He's pitching in the eighth, and he gets the last out in the eighth, and we're going to win a game with him going out there in the ninth. He comes limping off the mound into the dugout. He can't pitch any further. He's pulled a hamstring or something. So I think we put Turk Wendell in, and Turk shut it down in the ninth. And it was nail biting time, but it was a huge win for us. I mean, sure. We're the butt of jokes on the Jay Leno Tonight Show, but it was tough times, but we got through it.
So coming into 98, that's in the back of our minds. Obviously we're put it behind us, but so we start the season in 98. We're playing well, and I remember we won 10 in a row. And I remember Tom Bamboa walking up to me and said, we might not lose another game the rest of the year. And I was like, oh my God, I might as well just shoot myself in the head. Of course, we go to Minnesota in interleague. We lost the first game there. I think we lost the series, but in '98, now it's June, or no, it's May, and we got this good young pitcher in the minor leagues. And let's face it, he probably should have made the club out of spring training, but what we all did in those days, we still do as a group, we wanted to make sure that we got him for an extra year. He had to wait another year to be a free agent.
Right.
I knew, and his name was Kerry Wood, and I knew he was going to be a Super 2 because we waited about a month, and I thought he needed it. We probably could have made the club, but I was happy he went to AAA and just got to pitch a little bit. So he comes up in May, I believe, and his fifth start, he strikes out 20 guys against, at that time, and people don't realize this, Houston was the hottest hitting team in the league at that time. And you look at their lineup. I mean, they had 2 Hall of Famers in the lineup and several all-star caliber players. What do you remember about that day, Jim?
Yeah, well, I mean, that was a special day. It was a great, Kerry Wood was unbelievable. What a great kid. And, he was a smart guy too. He understood. He's a rookie. And in those days, he knew he kept his mouth shut and his ears open. He was very humble, but he just dominated. I mean, it was the Killer Bees, that group in, Biggio, Bagwell, Bell, whoever, they all had a last name starting with B. And he was just unhittable that day. Now, the thing about it is, Ed, he was whatever he was, 20 years old, I guess.
20 years old.
And I want to say he threw 122 pitches that day. And I don't know if anybody would be allowed to do that in today's game.
No.
Because by the 7th, they're going to say that's enough for him. He's done.
He didn't have a no-hitter. He gave up a scratch single earlier in the game.
Yes. And so, he's now, do you send him out there for the 8th? Do you send him out there for the 9th? And we really never even considered not sending him out there.
Of course not.
And he, I would have needed security to get home if I had to take him out of the game, Yeah. But I don't think a young pitcher today will be allowed to do that. Now, is it right or wrong that he threw 122 pitches as a 20-year-old that day? I don't know. He ended up later in the year, his elbow didn't feel good. He came back. He pitched in the playoffs the next year. He got Tommy John, but you know what? Who doesn't get Tommy John surgery? I mean, I don't know how much you can take care of him, how much you can pitch him, and say, okay, he's going to be safe now. Yeah. But the Bob Gibsons and Tom Seavers of the world, you're never going to see anything like that again.
No, you're not.
We make guys, we let them go 5 innings and they can't see the lineup 3 times through.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but
we're going to touch on that in a minute when we get past the '98 season. But now it's May. Kerry does that. And now he's a national celebrity. So now we go into June and Sammy goes off. I think he hit like 20 plus home runs in the month of June, and it was just an incredible thing to see. And love him or hate him, that streak he put together during that season was unforgettable. I mean, it's just like every time we needed a hit, he hit a home run. And, we were playing very well. Now we get through June, and now we've got, I remember, the tightest pennant race that I can recall, because the last 2 months of the season, it was the Giants, us, and the Mets.
Yep.
And we are, neck and neck. I don't think the 3 of us were ever separated by more than 2.5 games.
Maybe 1.5, 2. It was
unbelievable. I mean, and every day was like either heaven or hell. There was no in between. If we played good and lost, that was hell. If we played terrible and won, that was heaven. And we did some serious scoreboard watching. You try not to, but I remember we go to San Diego. And there's about 3 weeks left of the season, and we're going to have the coin flip. And because I think we had our season matchups, we came out ahead against the Mets and the Giants. So we're gonna have a coin flip. It's like first it's me and the Mets, us and the Mets, then the second flip's going to be us and the Giants. And I was absolutely convinced we were going to play the Mets. I don't know why, going back, I thought their team was better than the Giants. I just thought we were going to play the Mets. So, okay, Ed Lynch, you're going to call the flip. We literally did a coin flip on a conference call in New York. And they say, okay, what do you got? Heads. And it was tails. And I remember thinking, I just lost the season, because now if we're tied, we got to go into Shea Stadium and play the Mets. They go, okay, Cubs, Giants. Call it, Ed. Heads. It came out heads. I won. Yahoo. Who cares? We're not going to play the Giants,
Yeah.
And I remember the Tribune the next day, they wrote, those guys could be tough at times. Ed Lynch called heads, and of course it came up tails. So I get ripped for a coin toss,
Yeah.
So we go down to the last week of the season, and if I was ever going to get an ulcer, I was going to get one then. And we go into go into Milwaukee, and talk about the Brant Brown game as it's become, in lore, in baseball lore, about that game on getaway day game at County Stadium. What do you remember about that day?
Well, yeah, and I apologize because I can get long-winded on some of this stuff, Ed.
No, that's okay.
There's so many little stories about those days. That whole 98 season was a great year. But that particular day, we had a nice lead in the game, and now they are, they're coming at us, and they're making it a close game there in the ninth. And I remember I stayed with Steve Traxel a long time in the game because I wasn't real confident at that point with our bullpen until I got to Rod Beck. So I stayed with Traxel for quite a while. Steve comes out of the game. We get to the point, they've got bases loaded, 2 outs, fly ball down the left field line. And for whatever reason, when you sat in the dugout at County Stadium, the angle was a little odd. You really, when a ball would get hit, fair and foul was going to be a little tough. So I couldn't tell if it was going to be fair or foul. I knew it was a catchable ball, but I knew it wasn't going to be an easy play. And then it was kind of talked about as a routine fly ball. But for me, it was off the bat. The angle it was hit, it was never going to be routine. And sure enough,
it was a sun field in left
field
that day.
And Brant went over, got to the ball, and he basically just closed his glove a little too quickly. It hit down on the heel of his glove. It pops out. And I think, some baseball analytic people, historians could look this up. I mean, I think I've read where it's the only time in the 9th inning a game was lost on a 3-base era since the year 1909 or something.
That happened to us,
Yeah, well, it was the perfect storm. The bases were loaded,
yeah,
and not 1 or 2 runs scored. All 3 runs scored. Game over. And Ron Santo was in the booth, and later they played. You could play, and Ronnie was up there like, "Oh no, he dropped the ball," And Ronnie was such a great Cubs player, announcer. He loved the Cubs.
He loved the Cubs.
And he lived and died with those wins and losses. He wasn't one of these ex-players who was like, oh, we were better back in our day. And he was like, I love the Cubs.
Yes.
And he was distraught.
Oh, and somebody said they heard a replay of it. They didn't know if he dropped the ball or somebody was knifing him to death.
Yeah.
I mean, God, no. I mean, it was sad.
Ed, I'm going to say this, though. And I spoke to the team after the game, and I Brant Brown is also distraught. We're going to go to Houston. I'm telling Jimmy Bank, our traveling secretary, see if you can get Brown on the first floor at this next hotel. I don't want him on a high level, And he's distraught. And I met with the team. I said, look, guys, we're not here without Brant Brown. Earlier in the year, Mark Grace is hurt. He played a Gold Glove first base.
Yes,
Lance Johnson was down in center. He played center field. How many people in the history of the game could play Gold Glove quality first base and center field
in the same season.
Yeah, and I mean, Darren Erstad, the ex-Angel, comes to mind. He could do that, but not many people could do it. And I just let them know we're not here without Brant Brown. He's done a great job for us. And then I had to go calm Ron Santo down. I'm holding him, patting him on the back, like it's going to be okay, Ronnie. So we then go to Houston, and
yes. But I think if he catches that ball, it would have been an above average play because it was all the factors, like you said, the sun, it was a weird angle, the ball was tailing away, whatever. He catches that ball. I think we have a half game lead or a game lead going into Houston for 3, but now we're down a half a game or a game. I don't remember exactly. And then we go into Houston for that series. And what do you remember about that series?
Well, Houston,
that last day,
they had such a good ball club, but we're tied at this point. The Mets had dropped out, so it's now us or the Giants.
Okay.
And so that last day, we're literally tied with the Giants.
Going into the game, yes.
They're playing in Colorado. We're playing Houston. And so Terry Mulholland is pitching. And I hope your listeners appreciate what I'm going to say here, because this is a testament to Terry Mulholland. Terry was a physical freak. He was a specimen. I mean, this guy was he could stretch. He had strength. He had, just was an animal. And he starts the game. He that day we lose the game in the 9th inning. He pitched the whole game. It's like a 1-1 game. We botched a relay a little bit, and the throw home is not in time. They score in the 9th. Game over.
Yes.
So we're looking at the scoreboard. Houston is beating the Rockies. So we figure we're done. It's a long walk up the ramp, to the clubhouse. By the time we get up there, Nefi Perez, shortstop for the Rockies, has hit a home run to beat the Giants
off of Rob Nen.
Yeah. So now we're still tied. So we're going to play this 163rd game. And this is where the Mulholland story really, I think is special, is Terry had just thrown 120 pitches for us in this game. He comes in my office and in Houston, and he says, "Skip, use me in that game tomorrow." And I said, "What are you talking about, Terry? You just threw 120 pitches. What do you mean?" He says, "I'll be fine. Use me in that game." So we get to Wrigley Field the next day, and Terry grabs my arm, pulls me out to left field. He says, "Watch this." And he's playing catch with somebody. He's firing. I mean, he's airing it out. Just threw 120 pitches yesterday. So now I'm not closed-minded. I'm not saying I'm not going to use him. Now, in today's world, I'd be fired immediately. But again, another thing that goes along with this story is you're the general manager. I didn't call you and say, "Hey, Ed, can I do this?" I didn't ask for permission.
What I would have told you, I said, "Whatever you want to do, Jim.
Yeah,
we got to win this freaking game." It's not like he's a 19-year-old rookie,
Yeah, it was understood that Terry Mulholland, we know our players. This individual, he says he can do it. He's a veteran. We're going to let him do it if it comes up. Well, it came up, and I don't know the exact details, but I know he got Bonds out in the 9th inning there, and it was a line drive to Sammy in right field, but it was a big out, and Rod Beck ended up closing the game for us. But a guy throws 120 pitches, and he pitches in a pressure situation tomorrow night, airing it out again. It just shows, I think, that you can't make these determinations about how much somebody can pitch, how often, it's each individual's a little different.
Right. Yeah, really, to have the same pitch count for Nolan Ryan and Jamie Moyer, say, it's silly. I mean, if you're going to have pitch counts, and when we tried to do this is, sit down and look at a kid's history and say, okay, his pitch count is A. And now this kid's a college senior. probably not going to pitch in the big leagues. He's going to play an important role here. You know, his pitch count might be higher, you know.
Yes.
But to have a blanket pitch count on everybody is kind of silly.
And you know what? Terry knew his body. And you know, I trusted Terry. Terry said, "This is what I can do. You better use me." And we did. Another guy who pitched in that game was Kevin Tapani. Tapani won 19 games for us, and he pitched in the bullpen in that game. You know, instead of starting, you know, he wasn't ready to start that day. It wasn't his day to start. Traxel started and did a great job for us. And
he took a no-hitter, I think, into the 5th or 6th inning.
At least, if not the 7th. And Gaetti had hit a home run early in the game to put us up, and Steve shut him down. And, you know, now we're going to piece it together. I think we had Karchner and Mulholland, and then we went to Tapani, actually, in the 8th. And then Tapani went out for the 9th and didn't look like the same guy as he did in the 8th. And they started to rally a little bit. So, you know, we got Beck in there to close it down.
And the last out of the game was Joe Carter's last major league at bat. And you told me this story, and I looked at the replay, and I know what you were saying. He hit a handle shot to Mark Grace. Mark might have had one, it might have been a fair ball. I think it was. But Mark caught it, and he brought it down, and on the outside of his glove, he had this white spot.
Yeah.
You thought he had dropped the ball. It was like, oh, no. You know?
Yeah, I saw something white there, and I thought that he dropped it. And you know, Mark never dropped a ball in his life, you know. No. And so
but that was, you know, for fans that don't realize, that was our 163rd regular season game.
Right.
It counted as a regular season game.
Yeah.
And that night, for the only time in my entire life, I felt the stress to the point where I was running like 102-degree fever for about 3 hours after the game from stress. You know, 2.5 months of like 7 days a week stress. And then we went, you know, the next day we went up and went down to Atlanta, and, you know, we could have won game 1. We didn't. And the season was over. But that was a memorable year. But I just want to close off here, Jim, with some of the things I see now going on in the game. I'm a little concerned about, and I don't want to sound like the dinosaur. And we did everything right back then, and nobody does anything right now. But you know, the starting pitching function has been so disfigured, so to speak. I mean, where you have a pitcher like Blake Snell, he's won 2 Cy Young awards, and my understanding is he's never thrown a pitch in the 8th inning in his career.
Wow, I didn't know that.
No complete games with 2 Cy Young awards.
Wow.
When not one staff in the big leagues, starting staff, has averaged 6 innings per start in all of baseball, that's a little concerning.
Yeah,
I think there were 4 teams that averaged 5 2/3. There were 9 teams that did not average 5 innings per start from their starting pitchers. Now, as a manager, I'm not saying, you know, hey, you got to be a real man and throw complete games and all that. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, if you're using your bullpen 4 innings a night on average, and you're going to pitch those guys in April and May and June like it's the 5th game of the NLCS, August and September are going to be really ugly for you. You know, I mean, the starting pitchers, they really do have to take some of the brunt. You know, somebody's got to go out there 1,400 innings, you know, approximately in the season. And those starting pitchers need to take some innings where, if it was the 5th game of the NLCS, you might take them out of the game. But if they're up 6-1 in the 7th or 8th inning and there's a couple of guys on, hey, you know, get out of it. Get out of that jam. Give our bullpen a day off. Because I can tell you, as a reliever, when you go to the park and you don't have to warm up, no dry humps, you don't get in the game, boy, the next day you come in there and your arm feels like $1 million. It really does.
Yeah.
And you never see that anymore because teams just don't let their starters go deep. Do you see the same thing I'm seeing?
Yeah, and you know, we could go on forever. I love talking about this stuff, Ed. But you know, there's 25-man roster. Well, now it's 26, and what that 26 does is it allows you to carry at least 1, if not 2 more pitchers. You know, your first day in the big leagues, you might have been on a 10-man pitching staff.
Yes.
Pitching staffs now are 13.
Yes.
And there's a day now and then where it's 14. But for the most part, they got a 13-man pitching staff, and you need less players now than you ever did because every game is a DH now.
Yes.
You could play the game on a 24-man roster now when you play every game with a DH, because the DH, there's 3 times a game that the pinch hitting, you don't need a bench player. That's 3 times where you would have had to pinch hit. Those are gone.
Yes.
So you could actually carry less players than more. And as you carry more players, most teams are just carrying more pitching. So that means we don't have to have the starter go very far because we've got 8 guys in the bullpen, sometimes 9.
Yes.
And it waters the game down a little bit. And I know, I don't have the studies in front of me. Maybe it's guys throw harder now, so you need more arms because they're, the wear and tear on that velocity-driven pitching is going to hurt guys more if you let them throw 100 pitches. So now we're keeping them at 80 and 90 pitches and 5+ innings instead of 7. But it's not as good a game. To me, the DH game has caused a lot of this, and I like some of the things I've heard that people have suggested tie the DH to the starting pitcher. I like that thing, and I'll leave you with this, Ed. It's if you lose your DH when you take the starting pitcher out, you're going to be more inclined to leave your starting pitcher in.
No doubt.
Because you want that DH to continue to get some at bats. So you might get your starting pitcher a little deeper in the game. Because
I have not heard that. They're talking about if you take your starting pitcher out, you lose the DH.
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying.
So when the reliever comes in and his time to bat comes up, you got to let him hit or pinch hit for him.
It becomes a National League game.
Wow, I've not heard that yet.
I love it.
That is an interesting.
Now, it'll never happen.
Well, I don't know. I mean, there's things going on now that I thought would never happen.
I wish it would happen. I mean, for me, I prefer the National League game. That as a manager, I was honored to be in a dugout managing, and the guy in the other dugout is Bobby Cox. It's Tony La Russa, Jim Leland. It's Dusty Baker. It's Joe Madden and
Bruce Bochy.
Bruce Bochy. Oh my God! Those guys are in the other dugout, and there's some strategy going on there.
Absolutely.
If you're gonna try to get the best manager in the game, he better have some strategic edge. If you're going to pay him, back in the day when they started paying managers $5 and $6 million, which was a lot then for a manager, you better hope he's going to win a few ball games for you. You're not out managing anybody with this DH.
No.
Tony, the edge that Tony or Bruce or Dusty or Jimmy Leland, Joe Madden, Terry Collins, the edge that they could get on the other manager is kind of gone.
Yes.
When you take the strategy of the National League game out.
Yeah, I agree. And to talk about, I love this line. I'm going to go a little bit here. I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to. When I hear this, he can't get through the lineup 3 times. I didn't have overpowering stuff. I probably had, as major league pitchers go, below average velocity. I had an above average slider in terms of my command of it, and I had an above average changeup. So my stuff was pretty average. So when I got to the big leagues, I remember Joe Torre, my first manager, took me aside and said, "Hey, throw fastballs low and away until you have to throw something else." So I go out there, John Stearns, God rest his soul, the dude, what a great teammate.
Yeah.
Say what you want about him off the field. He was a little arrogant. I thought he was funny, but boy, during that ball game, man, this guy was a great competitor, and he'd hold that target right there on that lower black, and I could hit it.
Yeah.
So I'd go out there, 1, 2, 3, a guy hit a ground ball. I might get one up a little bit. Guy hits a rocket right to center field. It used to crack me up when that would happen, and the pitcher's out there kicking the rubber. I said, "What are you doing?" The guy just had his one good at bat, and he hit it right at somebody. So, So I remember going into games and pitching the first 2 innings or 2.5 innings without throwing a breaking ball. And so now you get through the lineup once. Now the second time, you're going to mix it up. If I have a Hall of Fame caliber hitter up there leading off the third or fourth inning, it's second time through. Mike Schmidt's up there. I'm going to spin him a first pitch breaking ball. I hadn't seen it yet. So he's going to take it, and the key is to throw it for a strike. Now I got him 0-1, and I can go from there. Mix it up second time through. Now the third time through, fourth time through, whatever, it's all about situation. It's all about the situation. I mean, if you're up 10-0, and it's a sixth inning, and I'm facing Jose Cruz Sr. for the third time, and it's 10-0, fastball's low and away until I have to throw something else, go back to that plan. Now, if it's a one-run game, now I'm going to pitch to the situation, I'm going to, not going to give him something he can pull out of the park. I'm going to stay away, stay down, stay hard, stay away, get ahead, stay down. Don't get hurt. If he hits a hard ground ball through the infield, tip your hat, But I don't see that now. I can't tell you how many games I've scouted at the major league level. I scouted for 16 years after my GM days. I can't tell you how many times I go out there and the leadoff hitter would come up and the guy had 4 pitches, fastball, curveball, slider, changeup. And he'd throw all 4 to the leadoff hitter, all 4 of them. So now, and you were a hitter. When guys are coming back into the dugout after facing somebody, what are they asking the guy? Hey, what's he got? What's his breaking ball look like? Is it up depth? Yeah. Can you see the spin? Does his arm drop at all? When you've saw everybody fastballs, they got nothing to tell them. Oh, yeah, his fastball kind of sinks a little bit. That's it,
Yeah.
And now, no wonder you can't get through the lineup 3 times when they've seen every pitch you have in the first at-bat. And you're going out there with absolute maximum effort every pitch you throw.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? It's got to mean, and if the hitter's swinging as hard as he can every pitch, when you have maximum effort coming in and maximum effort going out, you're going to see a ton of walks and a ton of strikeouts. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah.
And it's sad, I mean, those old cliches like your grandpa tell you to choke up with 2 strikes, haha. Shit, those cliches are the oldest cliches because they're the truest.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see us return to a certain approach. And I don't know if it's ever going to happen, but I mean, I love the game. I love watching the game to this day. I think the pitch clock has made a huge difference in our game. The average time went from over 3 hours to 2 hours and 39 minutes, which is unbelievable. So
that's the one adjustment that's the one I like.
Yeah, me too.
I hate the 3-batter minimum.
Yes.
I don't like that every game is a DH game. I don't like the man starting at second base and extra innings, and that doesn't make it right. It's just my feeling. 50 years in a game, I think I can express my feeling.
I think you're entitled to an opinion.
Yeah,
and I was dead against outlawing shifts. I was like, okay, we are going to make a rule that basically is going to assist a hitter with a bad approach to help him be more successful.
Absolutely.
The players have to make the adjustment. But then I realized that the hitters are not going to make an adjustment. They're just not going to do it. No. And there's nobody in that dugout that has the authority to make them stop doing it.
Yeah.
Because the analytics are they're telling them, hey, try to hit every ball out of the park. Is that the right strategy? I don't know. But after 40 years, I think I'm entitled to an opinion.
Yeah, I don't, I get it. The game changes. You need to do some things. I would prefer we didn't have shifts, that we didn't eliminate shifts, I should say. But if we're going to have it, the one that I could live with the easiest is everybody has to have their feet on the dirt. The infielders have to have their feet on the dirt. They can't be out in right field.
Shallow right field.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned earlier about Joe Madden talking about a 4-man outfield. I'm going to tell this one real quick, if you don't mind. No. I had the situation that Madden mentioned to Terry Collins about Griffey Jr. I kept my own charts when I was managing, and I had the same situation with Mark McGwire. I was telling our coaches and pitching coach and so forth that, look, Mark never hits a ground ball to second base. And the first person I ever heard say 4-man outfield was a guy by the name of Don Blassingame.
I remember Don.
Don played back in the 50s and 60s, and he was discussing one day, he said, if you really want to play no doubles, you should play 4 outfielders. And that always stuck with me, which, many years later, I'm managing the Cubs and where McGuire is McGuire. And if he hits a ground ball to second, we'll take it. But he's never hit a ground ball to second.
Yes.
So
you want him to try to hit a ground
ball to
second.
So I tell Morandini, I'm going to put you in right center when we're going to play 4 men out there. And, this never got talked about, Ed. Nobody ever discussed this. I don't think I discussed it with a writer or anybody. But we, on one at bat with Mark McGuire, nobody's on base. We played 4 men in the outfield and no second baseman. And I couldn't believe it. Mark McGuire takes a swing, hits a squibber off the end of the bat, one of those nubbers, and it trickled out to where my second baseman would have been, But, the point is.
Of course it did.
Yeah. But the thing is, it's what Madden said about Griffey. He's not going to hit a ground ball to shortstop. He's not going to hit a ground ball to third. And if he does, so what?
So what?
Yeah. So
I'd rather have Mark McGuire on first base with a squibber than hit one off the facing of the third back.
But in today's game, you're not allowed to do that. You can't. Joe Madden's thought there, Don Blassingame's thought, my listening to Blassingame, that's taken away.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Jim, I'm glad we covered just about everything we could think of. You've been a great guest. You're very articulate. You're one of the best managers I've ever had the opportunity to be around. And thanks so much for coming on today. Hope to have you back as the season starts getting going. If anything weird happens, and I don't understand why certain things were done by the manager. I can't imagine many of those.
Let's do it.
And thanks so much for coming on. And let's do it again soon.
Yeah.